Hello everyone, and welcome back to a very special Navis Novelite. Today I'm doing another miniature review. In fact, I'm doing a full review of an entire line of miniatures that were created by one of our community's most talented 3D modelers, specifically Deadly Kafeine. By all means, hit him up on the Discord, find him on Facebook, whatever you can do. Just find the man if you're looking to make a Tau fleet out of the style of the old exploration fleet, because he has effectively taken the exploration fleet, modernized it, improved it, and making it look like something that people would actually want to field on the table. Now, there are a lot of problems with the old exploration fleet miniatures, namely they're entirely made out of pewter. By this point, just over the course of history, they're mostly warped, out of position, they have to be bent into place, and they break very, very easily. Deadly Kafeine has modernized the design. He has kept it along the look and feel of the Battlestar Galactica sort of gribbly industrial looking ship, and he has done it across every one of the designs of the old Tau fleet. He's also done a really kind of special little thing on the side that I'm happy to show you guys. But right now we're going to get ready and started with, the big and the fancy one. Now you're also going to have to laugh at me for my, haphazard paint job, but this is the Explorer. Now there are two variants of the Explorer that he sells, which is already, right off the bat, more than GW ever did. One is your standard Explorer, which I will demonstrate here. As you can see, it is significantly larger than the Explorer of the original pewter version. It is a big honkin' ship, but I actually kind of like that. I like it that it's significantly larger than the old Explorer was, because these are primitive Tau ships. These vessels are not ultimately meant to, go into battle. These were the very first, extra stellar ships that they had. And while they have 12 hits, I'm not anticipating these things to have the modernization of the later Tau vessels or even the Imperial Navy. So I'm really expecting them to be bigger, to be less, efficient in design. And he really kind of captured that. There is, a sort of primitivism about the look that really was important to the old Tau ships. And, even if they are big, and they're certainly larger than than a Imperial vessel, especially Imperial battleships, which these things are supposed to compare to, they're not out of the scale for the game itself. And the large industrial look, as you can see, I didn't really paint the bottom because no one ever looks at the bottom, but you can see there's a lot of placement for a lot of turrets on it. He captured the look. He captured the look and made it look better. Now, some other things that I want to point out. There are 3 different kinds of module, which are glue-in, just like on the original Mini. There are, of course, the launch bays. There's the grav hook, and I can show you over here on the torpedo variant. There is this. It's a cargo pod, which I view as torpedo ammo, because as you can see in this version, he has placed in the front torpedo launchers, specifically for the gravitic launchers. For the variant of your Explorer that you will want to fire torpedoes with. So he has actually successfully made something that GW never did, which is a way to identify if your Explorer is the kind that'll bombard your enemies with mantas or shoot them with torpedoes. So as you can see, it's just a very busy, it's a very complicated looking model. It was actually quite easy to paint, which is one of the reasons why I enjoyed doing it, because it's much easier to do. But it's still just a functionally gorgeous miniature. It has a triple bridge up here. It also has a lot of hails and callbacks to the later Commerce Protection fleet, because it has the very similar bridge on the back here that looks very much like the Commerce Protection Custodian bridge, which I love. I love that call to a later design that would eventually come to fruition. Now, when it comes to building it, it was astoundingly simple. The central core of the ship is one big piece, one big printed piece. This is a 3D printed miniature. The individual bays here, here, and here are separate bits, and these individual weapon bits are, of course, separate. There's also a separate bit here. These things do, oh, I'm sorry about the bad focus. These two torpedoes do glue in. The bridges are glue in as well. So the biggest and most important difference from the original Explorer is that central spine is much thicker and far more resilient than the old one. The engines are larger and more impressive and more resilient. The weapon bits are pretty fragile, so be careful with them, especially the railgun bits. Now, the other cool thing is that the actual railgun bits, and you'll see these in the later minis, actually resemble Tau weapons in 40K, which is a very, very important thing because it helps you identify these as Tau. That was actually the great weakness of the original Tau miniatures. There was nothing that really connected them to the aesthetic of the Tau in 40K. Now, Carl, or Deadly Caffeine, brings that back and gives you some things that really make it look like a Tau ship. If I were to give it criticisms, I would say that the weapon bits are very brittle, so make sure Carl sends you multiples of them in case they break. There is a central hole for you to put your base in. The only problem is it's not quite centered, and it's hard to get a proper base in there. So you have to work with it when it comes to getting its base properly set in with the Explorer. But those are very small complaints. The fact that he was even kind enough to have a variant version with the torpedoes was just insanely nice of him. So the next one that I'm going to show you is the Hero. Again, as you can see that, not exactly perfectly balanced, but that's okay. I mean, it makes it easy for you to identify which ships are damaged. So, I actually like the Hero the most, partially because it does have that sort of more advanced look of a true warship than the Explorer, but also because it's got these big, gorgeous Carillion Corvette-inspired engines. And I did talk to Carl, and he did tell me that that's where he got the inspiration for it, from Star Wars. So I cannot love that enough. As you can see, there are bits that look like giant ion cannons right out of 40K. You have those big, beautiful rail guns. You have a really cool-looking double bridge. And, of course, the gravitic launcher at the front, which looks like, again, a giant freaking rail gun, which I really appreciate, because that's the way it was described. It's a giant rail gun, only it has, tracking drone ammo. So, as you can see, it's a very busy model. It's, again, meant to look like an industrial ship that's been effectively... Well, it was made to look like a warship that's been upgraded from an industrial ship. From an industrial design to a war design. And this ship, in size level, is about the same size as length at the very least, as an Imperial cruiser. It's maybe a little bit bigger than a Chaos vessel, but, Chaos cruiser. But they were already a little bit smaller than their Imperial counterparts. So it fits perfectly in with the scale. The other variant, which is the weapon battery only variant, of course, can easily be done because the individual placement of the turrets is entirely up to you. As you can see in this, lots of DACA. DACA is always important, even for the Tau. But one more criticism of these minis that I will bring up. There is not a lot of detail on the bottom. The bottom is pretty bland. I don't blame him for it because most people don't look at the minis from the bottom. But, he doesn't need to. He could have gone the extra mile. He didn't need to, and he decided not to. And that simply is what it is. I'm not going to be hypercritical of it, but it is something that the person who is looking for, the finest minis and the finest detail may be like, there's nothing on the bottom. I can't possibly paint this. But, for me, it's perfect. It cuts down on paint time. And me being an extremely lazy painter really appreciates that. So that's the Hero. Now let's go on to a really interesting one, the Merchant. The Merchant is, again, even if in the actual fleet, the Merchant was effectively designed to be basically just a body vessel, a ship that's there for the sake of being there, so you can take bigger ships. He went all out. He made a beautiful looking little industrial vessel it looks like something that, would live and function and survive for thousands of years simply because it's so robust in its design and it looks phenomenal. I think actually this design is a little bit more beautiful, in my opinion, than the Hero, simply because it's so gribbly and it's so primitive looking by comparison to the other ships. But you can really see where the other ships came from in the case of the Merchant, because this looks like the predecessor to the other two ships, and it can be really well heavily armed, but it usually isn't. It can be tougher if they make it better, but it usually isn't. And that's what I really like. Now, of course, there is the normal variant with nothing but railguns. I have also made one here that has the ion cannons instead, with its railguns at the prow. But, these are really solid, really pretty ships. So those are all the capital ships. And as you can see, they look so much better than their old GW counterparts. I don't even have GW counterparts to really compare them to. You can find pictures of all of these somewhere on the internet, but they're just so much better. And again, in this regard, the head here is a piece. There's the central body, and then there's the engine area that is a separate piece. When it comes to this mini, I have to actually double check. It is actually pretty much a single solid piece all the way through. The head, I believe, is, if you look, let me take this out. It is a solid piece through the backbone. I think the engines are a separate piece. Yeah, the engines are a separate piece here. Then, of course, there are the bays. These bays are interchangeable, by the way, across the fleet. So if you want to go, hog wild, you absolutely can. So they're very easy to build, which is the greatest difference between this fleet and the prior fleet, because the prior fleet fell apart on a whim. Just on a moment's notice, it just kind of flew apart for the sake of flying apart. Now let's get on to the escorts, because of course Deadly Caffeine didn't just, settle for doing your basic thing. So here is your Defender. Now, it's a little hard to see because this guy's primed black and my camera is not the best thing in the world, but you can see this thing actually has its railgun model onto it, which was never really modeled onto the original Defender. Let's see if I can get this thing to focus a little bit better. So yeah, you can see that right there. There's your gravitic launcher. And you can even see there's a little railgun battery right there on the top. There we go. Look, the little railgun battery on the top. So everything is what you see and what you get. It looks, again, it's about the same size of the Defender, the miniature Defender, maybe a little bit hair longer, but it's still in the same scale branch. It has that wonderful industrial look to it. There are two more little railguns here and here. But yeah, here's your Defender, and here's your basic escort. It looks so much better. And again, not made of pewter. It's, 3D printed resin. But as you can see, it even looks gorgeous. You can't even tell the dang thing is 3D printed. It's positively amazing. So, and now we're going to get on to the next one, the Orca. As you can see, the Orca, it has its ion cannon actually modeled on, something that the old Orca didn't have. It's a very small miniature, very, very tiny. It's about the same size as the original Orca, maybe actually a little smaller from my memory, but still, it's there. It has its actual ion cannon modeled on the bottom and its railguns. So, these are the things that come in on your your grav hooks. So if you even want to go so far as to model, these things actually onto the grav hook, you actually can right there. You'd have to glue it and maybe file a little, but you can still do it. They are all properly to scale with the rest of the ships. And they are also sold in packs of 3, which is really handy. But now, really the one that I wanted to show the most is because I think this is actually the most beautiful of all of the miniatures that Deadly Caffeine made. And I'm saying that knowing that all of these things are gorgeous, but this is the Messenger. And the Messenger I love because it actually looks more advanced than the rest of the fleet. And it's supposed to, because it's the AWACS. It's your intelligence vessel. It's the marker light, right? It has these cool little sensor domes here. It's got antennae all over the place. I love how this miniature looks and, how it is put together. Now, it is a massive pain in the rear to put this thing together because these spines up here are very fragile. I broke several of them. The miniature itself is also pretty fragile. I broke one of them just trying to put it together. That's because, I'm a ham-fisted, barbarian. There are antennas here. They're also very fragile. So be careful with your messenger, and do not try to drill this hole out even further. It will not work. It will destroy the miniature. It's very brittle. But yeah, it is a gorgeous little miniature. It's so much better than the old one, than the old messenger, which basically looked like a slightly updated Defender. But this just looks like its own ship. It lets it come into its own, and it just looks pretty all the way around, thanks to those cool little sensor domes. So there's one more special thing that I want to show you. Let me stand up, if you'll forgive me. I requested in part, because of one of the books of the void that we were designing, that Deadly Kafeine uses skill to make an escort for the Demiurge, and here it is. Here is one of the two escort variants. The other one looks pretty much identical, only that it doesn't have this cutting beam on the bottom. But if you wanted to play with a more full Demiurge fleet, we have added the rules for them into the Book of the Void 2. And these are positively gorgeous. He's capable of pretty much making anything. He's just that talented. So if you want some Demiurge escorts, this is really the guy to go to. Now, as you can see, it's very similar to the Alien Escort design, which is really awesome because I always felt the Alien Escorts looked like Demiurge. He calls these his Clippers, and he did make this special cannon version with the big gun out the front just for me, and I'm sure he'd be willing to sell them to you too. So, as you can see, he's even nice enough to add hole for the base, which is critical for escorts. But yeah, this is Deadly Kafeine stuff. He's amazing. At some point in the future, I'm also going to be doing a miniature review of the Necrons that he also can make. I don't think he made them himself. I think he had somebody else work with him on making them. But regardless, Deadly Kafeine is an astoundingly talented individual, and I have managed to convince him to actually make something of a storefront or a order form so other people can get their hands on these positively beautiful ships. Maybe the Tau Exploration Fleet can finally actually see the light of day in a way that isn't effectively used to bludgeon people to death across the board with a solid lump of pewter. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all again in the next video.